You are watching
I think
Xirtus.
that it's interesting that the families used to be so large in the six to four centuries ago. People were having 12 kids often, and even into the last generation, a lot of people in South America, I know their parents had 12, 11 siblings, but then now they're having 2 to 1 to 0,
You know
and
why that
it's
happened in Latin America? So there
there's
was
a
this
couple reasons.
guy. No, like there was a soap opera. So they were worried about they were very worried about birth rates in Latin America. And so this guy, I forget what his name is, but you can look him up and it's huge. They decided to partner with the state and then put into their soap operas that like abortion's okay, getting divorced is okay, not having more than one child is okay. And it changed the birth rates. And I think the birth rates dropped like significantly, like 20% or something wild like that. And this guy has modeled this. And now like there's a ton of YouTube videos on how to like indoctrinate people through media because of what they did in the 80s in Latin America. And that's when their birth rate started plummeting. So like
That's absolutely true. So when I was in South America, it felt like I was in Back to the Future. I was like, I've seen this one, because everything they would be showing Will and Grace dubbed. You know what I mean? Like, oh, this is the first time you're watching Will and Grace. Oh boy, this whole society is about to go through this, isn't it? And
but
they're
you
like,
should really look up
we just got Monsanto here. It's gonna be great. You're like, oh, and they're like, yeah, but birth defects are starting to happen. I don't know what's going on. I'm like, oh,
they opened like with this guy, like they coincided like to air these things in soap operas to normalize like killing your own child for women. And they opened up like clinics and things like
right.
that. And they
But what does that
purposely,
say about American soap operas in the 80s? You know, because this is just, we're just doing to their countries what we've already gone through in the 60s, even, you know.
well, it's like some model that they've done. I mean, behavioral economic stuff. And they're always doing these like social experiments and things like that to get the ends that they want. And that's what the Gates Foundation does. Like they spend so much money in like the World Bank and like all the behavioral economic stuff that they put out and like the experiments they do. It's just it's really wild what they what they're doing out there. Nobody even like pays attention. We're so easily manipulated because we're cognitive misers. So like, it's easier to take the shortcuts that they give you than to think.
It's a reality distortion field, and
Works.
it's funny they associate it with Steve Jobs, but it's actually like a Star Trek Tribble thing where like you can mentally produce another reality around you. And so if you can create a reality distortion field because you can control the media, then you can change the nature of reality, because you're changing the nature of so many things that are functioning around this new idea of how they're supposed to orient themselves. So I mean, you can make an entire country instantly. And you've seen this in Chile, like the birth rates are, I think, 0.4 or something, 0.4, 0.01 even is dropped, but they've an increase because they also have a new population of Haitian immigrants that they brought, like 2 million people. So populations are changing, but
I will say our birth rates were like drastically on the decline, but I think they just had a report come out that they went up a little this year, which is
yeah, I mean,
great.
after COVID and Trump, I feel like there was some baby booming for a second there, just for a brief
That
one.
among
Everybody was
citizens
home
or
bored, I
people
guess.
living on the continent would be an interesting.
Alex Jones is outselling Stephen King. It's because the plans of Klaus Schwab and the globalists are more terrifying than any horror story, says InfoWars. But you've seen this book, and it's about the Great Reset, and it just seems like it's super poignant. Do you guys have thoughts on the Great Reset in general? I mean,
I
because it
have it
seems like
upstairs.
that's
I just bought it and it's upstairs. It's like literally on my bed and I have not even started it at all. But yeah, I got it. I can't wait to read it actually.
All their plans are dependent upon the expert class, and the expert class is so exposed right now. Probably the most exposed the expert class has ever been since the advent of media. We used to have doctors smoking cigarettes and recommending certain brands and stuff like that, but we didn't have the internet to really capitalize on that and keep that idea on the front burner. But I think now is a great opportunity to strike at the expert class, and that is their whole messaging system to bring the social engineering down to the personal level. So we really need to just hammer away. They're so exposed. I mean, masks work today, tomorrow they don't work. And it's kind of boring to talk about this minutia and like everything that happened. It would be fun to just move on. But, the expert class is very exposed right now, and that's their Achilles heel. So hopefully we can continue to chisel away at that and just break down the public trust in experts in the medical facility and the technology, even historians and everything, So, I mean,
yeah. I mean, we could jump into a King Charles thing, but Mark, you felt like earlier I asked you what you're up to, and you had a big whammy. So maybe did you want
Oh,
to tell?
I was just distracted by the fact that in that Google search result, the first image was a picture of a sticker in someone's car. I actually have the exact same sticker. Shout out to Info Ninja. He sent me a whole box of these stickers that say stuff like "Resist the Great Reset." I spread these things all over my town. So who knows? Maybe that was from my own town.
Nice.
But yeah, I got a bunch of interesting things going on. I got a bunch of interesting books in the mail this week. Speaking of books, but I just want to hear what you have to say about King Charles, because I made a good point about this whole thing last night. I think that people often make the jest like, oh well, it's a symbolic monarchy, and that means they don't have a lot of power. And I'm thinking, no, look at that inverted, right? They invert everything. What do we mean by symbolic? What are we talking about here with social engineering, right? The symbolic rule, they're ruling over our consciousness with that symbolic, the archetypical symbolism that they use in all of these different performances, whether it's associated with royalty or not. There are all these different hallmarks of ritual at play. And who does that energy get funneled to? The monarchy, the royalty. And what do they do with that energy? Well, they siphon it for themselves and keep it away from us. So yeah, I'm interested to pivot into this topic because I've been thinking about it this week.
Well, you brought up the inversion thing, which is interesting. And so I've seen that they're doing this with the money. They say UK's money stamps in order to be featuring King Charles III after Queen's death. And people had talked about this before, that they plan to change the money at certain times, like the 70s and the 80s. And then again, 2030 is like the date, sometimes a year more or less, depending on what's going on with the royal family. So they could change it completely, have a new overhaul right now and just skip the 2030, or they could wait a few years. And it sounds like they're going to wait a few years. They're going to still do at the end of the year, Charles on the money, but they're not going to really change the design as much. They're going to go through a full design change in 2030. And that might be because Charles is old and he might not make it to 2030. And so by seriously, and William the Brave might replace Charles III. But the flip part was interesting. So during Elizabeth's reign, her profile faced the right. Charles' profile as the new monarch will probably flip and face the left, in keeping with the tradition that dates back to the 1600s of alternating the direction between the coinage of successive monarchs. There has been just one exception to this quirk in British history, Edward VIII, who, after taking the throne in 1936 and before abdicating the same year, insisted that the coins featuring his image face to the left. So similar circumstance, right? And this is Edward VIII is the monarch who left for Queen Elizabeth II to become the queen, right? He abdicated the throne, and so
are the polls about to flip, and we're going to have the Adam and Eve story?
I mean, it seems kind of an interesting correlation, and just the idea that there is this other empire that exists, and he wanted to keep on the left in order to wait.
You said William the Brave is supposed to take the next.
Right, because first off, you got Charles the First.
We're talking about social engineering. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. William the Brave.
Right. Well, you have Charles the First, and Charles the First was killed, right, and he was decapitated, and so England lost their king, and so for like 20, 30 years, you have the Lord and Protectorate Cromwell, Lord Cromwell, and he was in charge, and there was a democracy, and everybody hated it because in the democracy, the majority would be oppressing the minority. And there's a series of hierarchical factions and intersections of prejudice that let the Puritans take over and push to take away everyone's rights to pursuit of happiness and self-determination, et cetera, et cetera. So when they begged Charles II, who was living in Amsterdam, Charles II, and he'd escaped from his father, and he just smoked a lot of pot, and he had a lot of like prostitutes and like hung out in brothels, and he was very tall. And they said, dude, come back to England and be our Captain Hook and just take over for us and save us. And you can be our benevolent dictator and we'll protect you. And you can just give us the right to be libertines, and then we'll have syphilis again. And that's basically what happened, is that they kicked out the democracy, and it led to like Lord Wilmot, Earl Rochester II, right?
So these guys are just fronts, is really what they are, and they have advisors behind them, right? And
right.
That goes back to the viziers, right?
Well, that's the thing. The king was the front, but he was able to orchestrate from the Dutch monarchy to take back the crown, and the crown was more useful because having a dictatorship they could have an absolute check and balance against the democracy, and the democracy got out of control in England.
Yeah.
But then once they have a king in, then they have people doing crazy stuff. Like there's this dude who gets syphilis, dies at 29, and paints a picture of himself with his monkey. I mean, Earl of the Rochester was nuts, and like people were literally having sex in the streets in, you know, by the fire of 1666 that burned down London. So
can take away from Queen Elizabeth II is she was very demure. You know, she was on the throne for decades and really didn't have a public incident. She didn't embarrass herself. And then you look at King Charles, the day he's getting sworn in, he's literally having a temper tantrum because his super expensive fountain pen isn't working right, or his league. Oh, I can't bear it. Like literally, he can't bear it. Day one, he's getting in. So.